It is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Temple Grandin, a true pioneer whose work transformed not only the livestock industry, but the way we understand and care for animals. Dr. Grandin is a distinguished professor of animal science at Colorado State University, a world-renowned designer of humane livestock handling systems, and a powerful advocate for animal welfare. Her designs, used around the globe, have dramatically improved conditions for cattle and pigs by reducing stress and promoting humane treatment. Her research on animal behavior has shaped modern practices in livestock management, animal welfare, and facility design. But what makes Dr. Grandin's work so special goes beyond her scientific contributions. She has shown the world that empathy and understanding, seeing things through animals' point of view, are essential to good science, good care, and good humanity. On a personal note, this moment carries special meaning for me. I grew up on a dairy farm, and among cattle farmers, Dr. Grandin is known as the Jane Goodall of cows. Her insights bridged my early life with the path that brought me here today. In fact, it was my own curiosity about behavior in human and animal alike that first drew me into veterinary medicine. Veterinary technicians play a vital role in understanding and communicating with our patients who can't speak for themselves. Dr. Grandin's work reminds us how powerful that understanding can be and how it can change lives, both animals and human. Please join me in welcoming a visionary scientist, educator, and advocate, Dr. Temple Grandin.
We'll put the water over there. So it's really good and far away from the computer right here. Because I'm a visual thinker, so I can visualize risk, and I know what will happen to the laptop. If I spill the water on it, it will wreck the laptop. And whoever owns this laptop is not going to like that very much. I was very interested in the talk about mentors. Mentors were very important to me. I had a great science teacher. When I was young, my mother taught me how to read at age 8. Unfortunately, I have to rush off right after my talk because my mother's in the hospital. She fell, and I found out the hospital's just a few blocks, so that's where I have to go. But she really helped me out because I was a severely autistic little kid, no speech until age 4. She taught me how to read at age 8, and she knew just how hard to push me to get me to do things. You know, I'm not going to let me become a recluse in my room. I had a great science teacher. Contractors seeked me out to design facilities for him, and then I helped him with the facilities, and he helped me get my business started. So it was a mutual relationship. Mentors were extremely important. And then I did have some that were just tutors, because I was terrible in math. They were not mentors. I was interested in how he divided up the mentors. Well, let's get into thinking about how the animal looks at things. They live in a sensory-based world. You need to get away from language. Animals don't have verbal language. It's sensory-based. What is it? Seeing, smelling. In my very first work with cattle, I got down in the chutes to see what they were seeing, and they were afraid of stuff like a shadow or a reflection, something we wouldn't even notice. Now, this is kind of trippy. Some research done at Cornell University, MRI scans, and they found the dog has an internet highway from the nose to the visual cortex. Smell pictures? That's really trippy. Now I'm remembering going up an escalator at a trade show, and I could smell the machinery grease in the escalator, and then I could smell the popcorn in the trade show. Well, I don't know if that's a smell picture. Language is not required for thinking. I loved this research for either mathematical thought or for visual thinking. This is an interesting book. It's not one of my books, but I think it's a great book. It's about animal senses. Imagine the octopus living in a touch-based world. It's all about a touch-based world. Now, as an autistic person, I see pictures. All of my memories, they're like little phone pictures. and I associate things. And I'll associate something to something else. And when I was young, I thought everybody thought in pictures. I also have a book, Visual Thinking, where I talk about different kinds of thinking. And some people are more mathematical, and some people are more word thinkers. And a lot of people that really get along well with animals tend to be more picture thinkers and sensory-based thinkers, because they think about what's the dog feeling. I really like the presentation about just making it comfortable. Is it eating? You know, just the basic things. And I had major surgery one time and get back in the hospital, dining room had closed, and fortunately one of the nurses gave me secret stash out of the nurse's locker because I was starving. Now the thing about something new is if an animal can voluntarily approach something new, it's attractive. It's scary if you shove it in their face. I call that kind of the paradox of novelty. New things are both scary and attractive. Now, I think a lot of dogs today are living such a sheltered life, they're not getting exposed to enough different things. Oh, I can't believe this dog yesterday. I got to watch them try to take pieces of shoe out of a dog with a scope. It was interesting to see that. Couldn't figure out what the stuff was they were taking out. It was chewed up shoe. Unfortunately, didn't chew it up good enough so it would go through them. Well, I got to thinking about that. Our dogs ran loose in the 50s. They had a great time socializing with all the neighborhood dogs and all the neighborhood kids, and they wouldn't have eaten a shoe. We didn't have adult dogs destroying houses and eating stuff like that. Puppies chewed. They never ate a shoe, though. I think they're just lonely. They're just home all the time, and that's why they're doing that kind of stuff. It really kind of made me think. Now, the bad news, back in the 50s, there's lots of car accidents. It was a more dangerous world. But I think in some ways, our dogs had a better life. They had a dog social life. There were 2 black labs that would visit with the neighborhood kids. There was Tucky, all she wanted to do was chase the ball. And Hunter, really friendly, he could care less about balls. But I think Tucky would have destroyed the Kelsey's house if she'd been locked up in it. This was a super high energy lab. She couldn't get enough tennis ball throwing, and she'd just bring it up to you and keep dropping it and dropping it and dropping it. I think that Kelsey's house would have been destroyed, and every shoe in that house would have been gone too. Now, even chickens like the iPhone. See, that's simple attraction to novelty. Now, something that just happened suddenly can be scary to a person with autism too, because I think being autistic helped me. I assumed everybody lived in a sensory-based world, and too many dogs lead too sheltered a life. One study by Edwards in 2019, they found that dogs that are afraid of the veterinary also tend to be more afraid of new things. Some of the worst cattle to bring into town are the ones where they've seen one old farmer, one old truck, and they freak out when you bring them into town. Because they haven't seen different people, they haven't seen little kids, they haven't seen different trucks, they haven't seen enough new things. Now, this might explain why a horse suddenly spooks for no reason. See how that play set looks different when it's moved, when it's turned around? Now, we'd look at that and go, yeah, it's some kind of a toy. Well, the horse doesn't know what this thing is for, but it looks very different when it's rotated. So my student, Megan Corian, this was her master's thesis, and we've got a paper on this. She walked fillies and colts by this to where they no longer stopped. They no longer put their head up. It became a new object. So let's say I trained a horse to tolerate a blue and white umbrella. That's not going to transfer to a tarp. Well, the biggest problems a lot of times you have with horses is they go, oh, he was fine at home. He went crazy at the show. Flags, bikes, and balloons. I call them the big 3. Now we've got drones. And we had a very bad situation where a stupid news photographer took a drone, went right at some of our horses like this. They were all tacked up when we were supposed to ride them, and they were rearing and everything else. I said, it's going to take 20 minutes to calm down. Any animal gets really, really upset, like you get a cat fur ball, shut the exam room door, leave it there for half an hour. Let it calm down. It takes 20 minutes. Have you ever been in a near car accident? I can remember when a 2x6 came off a trailer, and I managed to avoid hitting it. The swearing went on for 5 minutes. We're not going to repeat that. But it took about 20 minutes to calm down. Now let's look at some things that the cattle were seeing. You see how the chute there in the second picture has no shadows. So they're going to move easily. Then other times of day, you've got these sharp shadows, and that affected the handling. especially in a place where they don't go every day. Or in a milking parlor, the new heifer will learn to walk over that. Or blinding sun. You've all been on the road when you're blinded by the sun. Might change the time of day you got to load that trailer. And I always get asked all the time, cattle getting scared of slaughtering? No, they're scared of the spider monster. And this appeared at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the cattle decided they were not going to walk over this. Then a few hours later, that's going to be gone. Little things that we tend to not notice, the cattle noticed. A car through the fence with a reflection on it, a little piece of red string up there on the post that might be just moving a little bit. They notice detail that we don't tend to notice. In one of my other presentations, I've got this sign from the Denver airport. It tells you not to leave your stuff behind in security, like your headphones or your passport or some other important thing. I just laugh my head off every time I look at this sign. Why do I think this sign is funny? Because it's got a boarding pass on there for Area 51 at Gate A51. That's why I think that's funny. But most people don't see that. Chains hanging down, little stuff we tend to not notice. And this is a picture I took down in Australia, and that's why the trucks look so weird. But this particular place had 2 identical cattle handling facilities, one that worked fine, and the other one, cattle wouldn't go through it. That's because they could see the truck. And I pointed that out, and they go, why don't we see that? Well, I don't know. Turns out that I got some big visual thinking circuits in my head. And these brain scans were really a mind blower. See my big visual thinking circuits. But one of the problems I have very bad working memory. Like if I get a number of texts, I got to write it down before I can call it. So you get any autistic vet techs or veterinarians will tell you one thing to help them out, pilot's checklists. So you got to learn how to do a procedure. It's got 7 or 8 steps. Write down the steps in a pilot's checklist format. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. Because if somebody goes yakety yak, 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 and there's 7 steps, I can't remember all the right order of the steps. And this kind of gets into my other area that I talk about is the different kinds of thinkers. You get the picture thinkers. They're really going to be good with animals and mechanics and art. Art, photography, animals, and mechanics, they all go together. And then you have the mathematical thinkers. They think in patterns. But I'm very concerned that we're going so much towards the mathematics. We're going to screen out the best vet techs, the best veterinarians, and the best airplane mechanics. Because these are the people that just understand how the animal behaves. They see how the hydraulic system on a plane steering might work. It's a different type of problem solving than the mathematical thinker. I just put the water over there. Water and laptops don't mix. So I know what will happen if I spill it on the laptop, and I don't want that to happen. It's a simple example of seeing risk. Mathematicians think in patterns, and then you have word thinkers that think in words. And then you have mixtures. And there's research that shows that my kind of thinker and the math thinker are totally different. I can't do algebra. I can't do any higher math. And you know what a Delta Airlines had to say at an aviation conference? Because I just started subscribing to Aviation Week. It's a really fun magazine. And they were complaining that the brand new maintenance technicians failed the mechanical aptitude test. You see, that's the visual thinking test. I can tell you who I want working on the hydraulics. It steers the airplane. You can't steer it without hydraulics. I want that old shade tree mechanic that learned some shabby old hangar, and he's going to be able to fix any hydraulic system just perfectly. A lot more sensory-based. Now, this horse got terrified of a black cowboy hat because he was abused by somebody who threw alcohol in his eyes of all the bad things. And that person was wearing a black hat. White hat was fine, black hat was bad. Now, should you wear your white coat or your blue scrub uniform? Depends upon how the dog perceives it. You know, if you kind of, now obviously you have emergencies coming in here, but let's say puppies are coming in, make that first visit really fun. Then that blue scrub uniform is going to be associated with treats. The first visit is hold it down, treat it roughly. I was very pleased to watch some of the handling yesterday. Then it won't be associated with something bad. But an animal will tend to associate good or bad things with something in the environment, like type of clothing somebody has on, type of vehicle, a certain place. And make sure that when an animal is introduced to a new place, a new person, it's a good first experience. Because that first experience with something new is bad. And it takes 20 to 30 minutes to calm down. There's some low-stress handling right there. And the importance of fear-free is being recognized now. I think that is really, really good. Now, one of the things I found, all the work I've done, is people want the magic thing more than they want the management, how do you actually do something. And when I first started, I thought I could design a cattle handling facility that'd be self-managing. Bull. You know what I really learned yesterday? I learned how to close a shoreline cage without making a big racket with it. Because one of the big complaints has been that they're noisy. They don't have to be noisy. And they're very sturdy. They last forever. And you don't have to have some other cage that's more fancier to be better. Because what I'd rather have is adequate with the right people in it. Have to have at least adequate facilities. And I kind of got thinking yesterday, I know you're under construction, so the cages are right in there where the people are at their desks. But a lot of pets get lonely. I'm thinking about, why did that dog eat that shoe? I think we really have to think about that. I don't know of a single dog in my childhood that actually ate a shoe. And they would have been dead back then. They wouldn't have been able to take it out. Now, zoos have been doing cooperative care forever. Here's a lion getting a nail trim. Voluntarily puts his foot up on the grating, and they feed it meatballs while it's getting a nail trim. And let's look at some of the simple things. Non-slip mats to stand on. Animals freak out when they slip. Also, teaching puppies to have their paw held, so nail trims are not warfare. Let's just teaching the puppy it's okay that strange people can touch you. Little kids are okay. Now, there's a reason why the service dogs are taken everywhere, so that nothing will scare them. And then I've seen cattle that they were raising in Mexico and down at the Philippines, and they're grazing the highway right-of-ways, and there's nothing that scares them. Now, my good friend Camille King was noticing in her animal behavior practice that a lot of dogs were turning gray prematurely, like 4-year-old dogs. And the dogs most likely to turn gray, and she's got a paper on this, they were the ones that tear up the house when they're home alone. They're the ones that are afraid of unfamiliar stuff. Fear, that's a big emotion. The other thing in some autistic people, bigger fear center. Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I take a low dose of antidepressants. Best thing that ever happened to me. You can read about that in my book, Thinking in Pictures. Now, animals genetically can either be high or low fear, and it might be called bold or shy in the animal behavior literature. High fear and low fear, and bold and shy, they're exactly the same thing. It's just different wording. And the dog that was the bold personality when it came into the shelter was less likely to get sick. It didn't get as scared as the animal that had a higher fear. Do animals have emotions? Absolutely, they have emotions. And the thing that's crazy is back in the early 90s, I was forced to take the word fear out of one of my papers in cattle, and I had to call it agitated behavior. Neuroscience, for years before that, recognized emotions in animals. But veterinary science and animal science were real slow to pick it up. Now it's totally accepted. This is an interesting study on horses, that 2 little genetic changes that reduced back pain and more serotonin neurons in the brain made them a whole lot easier to train. Now, I really like the Jack Penskep emotional systems. There's a wonderful paper he did in 2011, and you have fear. And that's a separate brain system from separation distress or panic. I don't really like the word panic. It's too easy to mix it up with fear. But fear and separation anxiety are 2 different things. And then you have anger. And one of my students did a lot of the work years and years ago on temperament selection in cattle. So a lot of the cattle we have a lot less wild, but we're getting them, some of them now, where they're so tame that they don't want to do something, they'll just kick your head off. They've gotten so tame. Then you have seek, or the urge to explore. Some animals, some dogs want to explore everything. And other dogs are afraid of everything. Some cattle will go out and climb up the hills, eat lots of grass on the hills. Others won't. and it's related to sire. There's genetic differences in the urge to explore. And then you have the sex drive. You got mother-young caring. So you might have a cow that will tree you in the pickup, defending her calf, but she doesn't bother to lick it. They're different emotional systems. And then you have play. Now, that horse that was there on my first slide, those are some of our equine therapy horses, and they live in Denver, and we can't let them play on the roads around on the highway and stuff. So they let two at a time out in the arena, and they play with that big ball, and they really bounce it around. But that has to be introduced right, because you introduce it wrong, they'd be afraid of it. So both genetics and the environment affect how an animal's going to behave. You can have an animal that's a high fear genetics, get him exposed to a lot of stuff, he's not going to be afraid. And I've seen some really nice cattle that were high-strung genetics, and they were nice and calm. And then I said to the rancher, what if a hot air balloon landed on your ranch? And he says, yeah, that happened. And they took off, because that would have been sudden novelty. Sudden novelty. That's when you'll really see the high fear versus the low fear genetics. That's where you really will separate the genetics. I don't know how many cute puppies pictures there are online of dogs in the brace position on a smooth table. Let's give it a non-slip floor. That applies to all the animals. And I know you're under construction, you had a diamond plate floor in your elevator. Oh, people think that's a non-slip floor for cattle. It's not. I despise that material for livestock. Despise it. I can't believe some of the stuff in Europe they're building with that dreadful floor. And it's a skating rink as soon as they pee on it. You have to have a lot more grip on the floor. Now, it's fine for in the elevator there. It's fine for that. But yes, I was walking on that a whole bunch yesterday, and reminds me of why are they still fooling with that? And they might like to look at the research of Dr. Gregory Burns, training dogs to lay still in the MRI scanner for 15 minutes. Boy, he's really finding out they have emotions. He's got the funniest book, Sneaking Dogs into the Hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, now he has his own scanner. And then he made a fake scanner out of the cardboard tube they formed concrete bridge supports, and trained them with lots of hot dogs to lay still. And there's some really cute pictures online. Everything's staying still except the tail is wagging. Now, do animals feel pain? I mean, I think it's almost kind of crazy to say, well, do they feel pain? But it wasn't that long ago that they were doing surgery on infant human babies with no painkillers, just paralytic agents. So babies don't actually feel that. Yeah, they do feel pain. Mammals and birds both will do self-medication, eat something that tastes or terrible to relieve the pain. It's self-medication experiments. Definitely they feel pain. And what do the animals in the animal shelter need? They really need is 45 minutes a day for a volunteer to come in and take every dog out every day for 45 minutes of walking and funsies. That's what they need. And if you do that, the cortisol the next day will be lower. Now, you have to keep doing it, though. But what was done in my student's experiment, Krista Coppola, she's now an independent animal behaviorist, is controls just got stuck in a cage. Experimentals got to have a good time with her for 45 minutes, and the salivary cortisol was significantly lower the next day. But you got to keep doing it every day. That's what they need. We've bred them to be social. That's what they need. Here's a great dog park in Kansas City. I went to a fetch conference, and then we had our dinner cocktail party at this place. Shipping containers, bar and restaurant. Then you go and have cocktails underneath the freeway bridge next to the freight train tracks. You couldn't have a worse piece of land. But I never saw so many kids and dogs having a great time. Lots of tennis balls provided by the house, but they got some rules. No outside doggy food, no outside people food because of resource guarding. No outside toys. And they have very attentive staff, pick up the dog poop just instantly. And if too many dogs congregate, they break that up before a fight gets started. It has to be very well managed. And then I asked him, what about some of the really aggressive dogs? And the owner of this place admitted he had to kick out his own dog. It was too aggressive. 10% of the dogs they had to kick out. But it was so nice to see all these kids and dogs, and yes, cocktails are allowed for the tables underneath the bridge with the freeway traffic going over the top of it. Okay, do pressure wraps actually work? Do thunder shirts actually work? Or are thunder shirts BS? And Camille King, the really great animal behavior specialist, she did a really clever experiment, and I helped her with the methods, is we're going to leave a dog alone in a kennel with a thunder shirt on tight. But then for control, so we can control for clothing, we'll put a thunder shirt on that's way too big, so there's no pressure. And then what does it do when you leave it alone? Well, it spent less time looking at the door, waiting for Camille to come back, and it reduced the heart rate. And if they were not on medication, it was more effective. So it seems to really work for separation distress, or maybe more than the thunder. And they got the idea from my squeezing machine. I had terrible anxiety attacks. So I invented this, modeled it after a cattle squeeze chute, and pressure helped calm me down. It's very common, works with dogs, works with people. And if you know anybody that's autistic, might be afraid of loud noise or something, if they control the noisy thing, whatever it is, that might help desensitize it. If it's a kid and it's maybe a vacuum cleaner, let them turn it on and off. Let them turn it on and off, and vacuum cleaners have gone to favorite playthings. And there's a rear view picture when I wasn't quite as fat as I am now. I can tell you, like, size the air cylinder on that, I know how to do that math. See, I can do the math if the math is related to something specific. Okay, they say you need algebra for dosing drugs. I can memorize that, just flat memorize it. Don't have to have a whole course in algebra. But I'm worried with all these big math requirements, we're screening out some of the people we need. Yes, and the airlines are discovering, and they're not very happy about this, that what's going to happen when their old techs leave? No, I want that visual thinker who can listen to the hydraulics and tell you something's going to break on it. And then I went to Stanford. I was doing my talk on different kinds of thinkers. And this lady came up to me, and she says, the mathematicians don't get me. I work in facilities maintenance, and I listen to the equipment in the basements of the buildings. And I can tell you right when that compressor pump's going to fail, because it sounds rough, and I order a new one, have a spare. He says that engineers at Stanford don't get me. But she listens to the music of the stuff on the roof and the stuff in the basement. And if they'd like to not boil to death in the summertime or have water, stuff has to be working. Now, the thing is, a brain can be more thinking or brain can be more cognitive. See, autism is a true continuous trait. When does slightly geeky become autistic? You know, you got the social yakety yaks, and I found this article I thought was so great by Reiser. Solitary mammals provide an animal model for autism. So think about your big cats. Lions are much more social than panthers or leopards. Does that mean there's something wrong with panthers or leopards? Now, obviously, having speech delay is something wrong. But you see, in the milder variants, it's just a personality variant. I can get really off interested in scientific things I find interesting. I can get off talking about that. And then you look at the sociality trait in dogs that's related to Williams syndrome in people. They're not too smart, but they're very, very social. And so why are things that are involved with a brain disorder just behavior traits in dogs? Cattle temperament, for example, related to anxiety disorder. See, the problem is, what separates us from the animals is all these stem cells I got to grow, and grow this gigantic computer up here. And it sometimes gets built kind of sloppy. The gigantic computer has to grow. That's mainly what separates us from the animals. It's not the emotion centers, raw computing power sitting up here on top. Well, compared to wolves, dogs often will look to us to help solve a problem. We've bred them to be hyper social. And I'm seeing a little Pomeranian yesterday right near somebody's desk, and he was wagging his tail. I think he liked the fact that the people were there. You know, we really got to think. I really did some thinking about the, yeah, you're crowded in there, but maybe all the people there is not totally bad. You got to think about it. Now I'm seeing pulling this gunk out of this dog. I found out it was shoot up chew. Yeah. The same sequence, the same genetics that gives us a large brain is also related to brain disorders. Paper by Sikla and Searles. You might want to look that up. Now, you do something rough with an animal, and you just force it. You make the cortisol just go up really high, the stress hormone go up really high. When an animal cooperates, okay, a dairy cow cooperates with milking, or antelopes, we trained antelopes at the zoo to completely cooperate, then the cortisol doesn't go up. because they don't get scared. It's that simple. And back in the mid-90s, I worked with Nancy Erlbeck, and we trained antelopes to cooperate with blood draws, vaccinations, all kinds of stuff. Now, one thing that we learned, the veterinarian who had shot them with the dart gun could never handle them. He was the bad person. It didn't matter what you dressed him up in, that you kept his mouth shut and didn't talk. They did not like him. And unfortunately, that's not in the paper because he's one of the authors on the paper. He didn't want to admit that all the animals in the zoo hated him. But you see, you start out in the beginning with cooperative care, then veterinarians like fun time. I saw the panda at the National Zoo. They were doing some, veterinary practicing on him, and he just loved the little bits of pear. But he also had a stereotypic behavior where he was taking the bamboo and doing like this on his teeth. And the male had to be taken out because they were afraid it might hurt the cubs. Boy, that panda loved his keeper. His keeper came up to this little window. He was lonely. That's why he was doing that weird behavior. Even though he had plenty of forage to eat, he was in a really beautiful exhibit, he was lonely. And as I said before, people always want the magic thing more than they want the management. And there's research that shows that good stockmanship matters. Okay, I heard a lot of things about just basic nursing care this morning, and people sometimes forget about the importance of just these basics. If it's had back surgery, give it a soft blanket to lay on. Just basics like that. Make sure the first experience with a new person, a machine, a car, a place is good. Really important. And sometimes horses will be less fearful when they're confronted with something new if they have a familiar person with them. Same thing with the dog going in. Less afraid of something new if they've got a familiar person. And then you might have the situation where somebody brings in their attack dog. Now it's going to try to protect the owner against you. You have to look at how your animal's perceiving that. So what some of the police departments do is they train them that when you're holding the Kong toy, it's okay for strange people to touch you. When I'm on the leash, I protect, and when I'm off the leash, I'm your best buddy. Dogs tend to make categories. I'm in the cab of this semi-truck, I'm going to bite your hand off. But if I'm outside the truck, I'm best buds with him. Yep, big, black, fluffy Millie. When they had to bring the truck in for repairs, they learned to just get Millie and take her in the shop and give her lots of pets. But you stick your hand in that cab, she'd bite it off. And one night, somebody tried to rob him at a truck stop, and Millie bit the guy's hand off. Yeah, very, very strict categories. Well, I can understand categories because my thinking works in categories. See, to understand something like levels of badness, I have specific examples. Gum on the teacher's chair, that's not robbing a bank. You see, but I see pictures that are very specific. I was looking at all the stuff about the blood gas, and I was trying to figure out the way I'd approach that is I want to get certain cases, and then I'm going to mark that chart to where I can learn certain patterns. Go, boom. Yes, and of course, I perked right up about the brachycephalic dogs because one of my biggest concerns in animal welfare is we're breeding animals with all kinds of stuff wrong with them. And I call that bad becoming normal. And it happens slowly. And someone will say, well, that's normal for the breed to be that way. No, that's bad becoming normal. I'm going to come back to that. All my thinking uses bottom-up thinking. Concepts are learned with categories. You see a veterinarian or a tech that gets lots of clinical experience, they go, well, I saw a cat 2 years ago. It looked like this. It's got this one test, and it'll be confirmed. You see, that's bottom-up thinking. Bottom-up thinking, animals do it. Autistic people do it. And so does ChatGPT. It does it too. One of the problems with ChatGPT is he sometimes makes stuff up and makes up scientific references. Now, where it really shines is when it does very specific stuff, like just looking at lung x-rays, something very specific. Well, you can see here, this whole big flock of sheep, they've got a flight zone there. They're not totally tame. Totally tame sheep wouldn't do this. This is affected by genetics, the amount of contact with people, and the quality of the contact. Is it quiet, gentle contact, or yelling and screaming at them? So I approach the cattle, move away, but you see how the tan one there is looking at me? Yeah, cattle want to look at you. And then there's some where I'm so far away, I don't affect their behavior, they're just eating. If you ever do have a chance to work with any cattle or horses, sometimes you walk back by in the opposite direction, that makes them go forward. Sometimes really, really works. I want to talk a little bit about how I got into the industry. One thing I learned was to sell my work, show off the work. I'd show off things that I had designed. I also saw doors to opportunity. There's a scene in the HBO movie, Temple Grandin, where I go up to the editor and I get his card. Because I knew if I wrote for that magazine, it would really help my career. I had the guts to go up and get the card. Because I'd sold a lot of candy for charity when I was a kid. And when I was 9 years old, in my generation, kids had to put their good clothes on and be hosts and hostesses at their parents' parties. It's now official. Bill Gates is on the autism spectrum. And he had to do the same thing, sell stuff for charity. She put him in scouting, and he had to be a host at Mother's Bridge parties. So he got used to talking to adults. I'm really pushing this now because I'm seeing some of these, even regular students, they don't want to talk. No, there's time to put the phones away. I thought it was great when I heard about a club where you put all the phones away and college students are going to just socialize. So I showed off my work. I learned to sell my work. And I've told other people that are autistic and that might be having a hard time, make yourself good at something. The other thing is when you get into trouble, ask for help. Students are not doing that today. And when I failed my first math quiz, I asked for help. I went to a small college, and Mr. Dion tutored me in his office. And then masters, I asked for help. I had a grad student tutor me. But I asked for help at the first sign of trouble. The big problem I'm seeing today, especially since COVID's been over with, is people are not asking for help quickly enough. It's a big problem. So that was a drawing right there that I sent to Cargill back in the late 80s, and I designed the front end of every Cargill beef plant in North America. I think that's doing pretty good. I also discovered when I started working in construction, all these people working in the shop that had barely graduated from high school, they could build anything and lay out the entire factory. It's called industrial process equipment. And I'm very concerned these kind of people are getting screened out. We can't do it, we're non-mathematicians. But the thing is, you need our skills. And I have to say, I wasn't too happy. Cheryl cleaned up my magazine pile and she put all my aviation weeks in a big pile. I discovered the article about the technicians at the airport. I'm not happy about that. And then you might wonder why it's curved, because animals have a natural tendency to go back to where they come from. So you're using that behavioral tendency. Again, non-slip flooring, just so important. All right, how many of you noticed that that animal was looking at the sunbeam? That's the kind of stuff I want you to notice. The non-slip flooring is just kind of a decoy slide. I show that slide to elementary school kids, and over half the hands will go up. Also, zookeepers will see it. Now, I'm a big fan of measuring things to prevent bad from becoming normal. You know, people could go out, do all these cattle handling workshops, and then a year later lapse back into bad practices because it goes bad slowly. Now, I used to think when I was in my 20s that I could build cattle handling facilities that would self-manage. I got lots of equipment out in the industry in the 90s. Half my clients tore it up and wrecked it. Then, what made things change was when I started teaching McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's how to evaluate the pork and beef meat packing plants. And when you have a big customer doing that, what a difference. And I had a very simple, easy to understand measurement system. And this is some very good handling data from big feed yards. Oh, electric pride usage used to be 500%. You know, now it's 5%. Falling down, oh, you used to have some places really awful. You'd have 10 or 15% of the cattle fall down. That's terrible. But you see, I measure these things. Am I getting better or am I getting worse? I've also done quite a few talks with Marty Becker with Fear Free. And one of the things that I've discussed, and this is the same thing with cattle handling, The head of the practice has to be behind it. The head management has to be behind it. And it is going to be slower while you're learning. It is going to be slower. And I still have to get back out in the field. I got 2 beef plants I had to go to this summer because some guy in a shop decided to change the design on a piece of equipment, which really messed it up. So I had to go back and fix that. But the other thing is the top management. Well, one of the plants got right on it. The other one, the manager, well, now he's finally doing some of the stuff. But top management has to get behind, yeah, we are going to change some things. And I have found that most people can be trained. There were a few people we had to get rid of. And I get asked, what am I the most proud of that I've done in my career? I'm very proud of this graph right here. In 1996, I collected data for the USDA on how these beef plants were working. This is really disgusting. Only 30% did a decent job of stunning due to busted equipment. You see, that's management. And then, when I got the power of McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's, things changed. But it was very simple things. I'll also tell you what I did. I did reverse conflict of interest. I had a lot of expensive things to sell. I bent over backwards not to sell them. I'm very proud of the fact that out of 74 plants, only 3 had to buy expensive things. Everything else we fixed with non-slip flooring, repairs, training, supervision, and 3 managerectomies. We had to get rid of the plant manager. And then things turned around. And then there was some stuff that was just hopeless. But what I saw yesterday is a lot of good things going on in a very cramped place. I think a little Pomeranian was glad to be next to somebody's desk. He was wagging his tail the whole time. See, that's the kind of stuff I tend to notice. And then that's like a little picture. And another little picture is a dog with a scope down it, the table with the shoe gunk they had pulled out of it. You know, I'll remember that really well. You know, that's how my mind works. It sort of like takes little pictures of things that interest me. This is the original temperament work my graduate student did 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when cattle really were wild animals. And I had the radical hypothesis that animals that went really crazy when you handle them would have lower weight gain. They did. But 30 years ago, that was radical stuff. Now, the thing is, I don't want to overselect for temperament. We got to start looking at what's optimal on some of this stuff. I'm really concerned about breeding. I think some of the biggest welfare issues we have is breeding. And I'm going to bash pets and livestock equally. I'm equally going to bash both of them because they've got problems in this. But one little tip before we get into that is I see people do this to dogs all the time and horses. That's hitting. Stroke it. Stroke it. Well, horses go like that. Stroke it. Don't do this. Stroke it. Make it feel like mother's tongue. So I'm going to just do some basic welfare things out on the farm. I do handling, scoring, you know, sores and lesions. I mean, you put dairy cows in stalls that are too small and that rips up their knees. Lameness. Here's another example of bad becoming normal. 3 studies have shown this, 3 separate studies. If I ask a dairy producer, what percentage of your cows are lame, they underestimate by half. 3 studies have shown that. They get so used to seeing the mildly lame ones, they don't see them anymore. Bad becoming normal. Or they're dirty, they're skinny, ammonia levels. These are the basic things for livestock, animal welfare. Very simple. And one of the reasons why my scoring system worked with the meat plants is it was simple. It was like traffic rules. It also uses the concept of critical control points. What are the really important things to measure? Well, out in the highway, it's going to be drunk driving, speeding, and stopping violations, red lights and stop signs. Then seatbelts. Why aren't they not in the top 3? They protect me. They don't protect you against my horrible driving. But they're going to be in the top 5. What are the really important things? And traffic rules, for the most part, work. What's important to measure? Well, look at all the stuff here that can make cattle lame. Well, right now, I'm very concerned about some of the horrible feet and legs we're breeding, because we're breeding so much animals just for production. Well, we need to breed decent feet and legs. And I was at a veterinary clinic, I won't say where it was, but there was this x-ray on the screen, hideous deformed cat leg. And I go, what is this? And it's like a naked dwarf cat in the back joint, the way the leverage is on, I guarantee the back joint's going to break. Just looking at it, like from an engineering standpoint. Why are we breeding something like that ends up having joints that break? I've got problems with that. Here's a steer with a post leg. Here's a pig with a hideous foot. That's genetic. Don't breed that kind of stuff. Now here's a mild case of crooked claw. This is genetic. Here's a 4-month-old red Angus heifer with a crooked claw. That's genetic. She's a 4-month-old red Angus heifer, just breeding for rapid weight gain. See, I like to look at genetic selection, at least in the farm animals, sort of like a national budget. I got the economy, the meat or the milk. I got the infrastructure. That's going to be the skeleton, the feet, heart, reproduction. And then I got the immune, fighting disease. Are we breeding that out of them? There's some evidence we might be. Let's look at how over-selection for a single trait can change an animal. These are the Belyaev fox experiments. These were done back in the 60s and 70s. Well, Belyaev wanted to breed a fur fox that wouldn't bite your hand off. So they simply started selecting over the years for a gentle fox that may lick your hand, not bite it. Look what they got. Stocky, black and white. Look at the shape of the body there. Who would have guessed that just selecting for a gentle fox would change it this much? Traits are linked. This is still not fully understood. Then I was at an ALAS meeting. These are special mice that you can buy for different cancer experiments. They have different immunodeficiencies. And if you get a copy of these slides, you can actually enlarge that and you can actually read. But each little mouse has a different immunodeficiency, specially bred. But look at how different you've got. Little tiny white ones, black ones, naked ones, rat-like ones. And all they did is have a different immunodeficiency. And look at how you changed the phenotype. Deer that are being, farmed right now, they're a whole lot gentler now than they were years ago. You can get in with them. All right, now we got to bash, it's bulldog bashing time. And you better believe it on that blood gas thing, all the acidotic stuff, brachycephalic, can't breathe. Yes, you better believe it. I was laughing that right up. That's what it used to look like. How do we get to this monstrosity? Now, I really like this picture. 1938, you can look this picture up. 1938, New York Times, Bulldog's Dilemma. And we got to that. Now, if you just read the breed standard, it says short nose, broad shoulders. Where do you stop? Maybe that picture should have been the breed standard instead of a verbal breed standard. Broad shoulders, short nose. Where do you stop? Now, here's two little pugs I met at a dinner party. And the little black one's had the surgery, still can't breathe. See how flat he is? Now, the other one has a little bit more nose. It's fine. I'm not saying not have pugs, just a little less extreme. And it was fine. And that little pug actually was an intact male. And I said, well, use him for a stud. And they said, well, he doesn't have any papers. Well, you can genomically test him. But there's the difference there between one that's totally functional and the other one that's not. Optimal. It's a hard concept. Okay, we're breeding some cattle now that have got some very bad problems with heart failure, where they're getting heart failure and misshapen hearts. And that used to only be a problem up at high altitudes. That's no longer the case. It's now a problem at low altitudes. We've got some cattle that a month before they're supposed to get slaughtered, dropping dead from heart failure. Yeah, that's totally atrocious. That's going on right now. And it seemed to be, it all goes back to sire. It's all genetic. Certain sires. Well, why are we breeding a crippled heart patient? Some people don't like it when I've called those animals a crippled heart patient. And here's this extreme Arabian horse. Ugh, why are you breeding that? It's halter classes. It's like a horse beauty contest. Now, this is some of the stuff that I've really got a problem with, is animals that don't function. And we need to look at the quality of life. We've got to prevent suffering. In fact, the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty of Animals started here in New York because when there were carriages all the time, carriage horses were abused so badly. and we've got to prevent suffering. But does an animal ever have any good times? I've seen dogs out running around, like Tucky, the one that was ball crazy. She just was having a good time. She'd ask you to keep throwing the ball. She'd pick it up, she'd drop it in front of you, pick it up, drop it in front of you. She just wanted you to throw that ball. Does it ever have any good times? Well, for our horses that are landlocked in downtown Denver, introduce the ball really carefully, and they'll get out in the main arena, buck, jump, do behavior that they would never do with a person riding them. They know their categories here. But it looked like they were having a good time. But you have to take the effort to do this, to give each pair of horses, 20 minutes to just really run as fast as they can in the arena. Because we can't let them run down the highway at Denver up the freeway ramp, that's for sure. We've had a few of my books here. We've run out of them now. And then I also have some textbooks, Improving Animal Welfare, Practical Approach, and this genetics book on genetics and how that interacts with behavior. Hopefully, we've got some time for some questions. Yeah, we've got a few minutes for questions. Always like to do some questions. I'm going to pick somebody. We're going to get some talking here. I go to 3:15 and then I'll stay here for the break. My sister just texted me saying, when are you coming to the hospital? And I'm going to have to go over there. I just found out this morning. That's what all that going out in the hallway was about this morning. Normally I don't do that during meetings. But all right, let's see. We got to have a few questions. Okay, all right, right there.
You mentioned earlier that there were a lot of things that cows seem to be visually afraid of, like the chain and the shadows. Do you think that might have anything to do
Well, the animals can they see the shadow something null. You see in a dairy, for example, the new heifer will stop and refuse to walk over a shadow maybe in the milking parlor. The experienced cow just walks over it.
Do you think it might have anything to do with the colors that they do and don't see compared to us?
Well, yeah, dogs don't see red. They're dichromat. And one of the things that dichromat vision does, it gives you better night vision. See, there's trade-offs. And the other thing, get asked, well, what color should you make stuff on? Cattle handling facilities just want to make them all the same color. But the other thing is so much depends upon the experience. See, I think a lot of animals today, both pets and horses, they're leading too sheltered a life. They're afraid of too many different things. They don't get exposed to enough stuff. And I was watching on the TV screen, digging pieces of shoe out of this dog, and the tool's really cool how it does it. But I got to thinking, the dogs of my childhood did not eat an entire shoe. A puppy would chew it, they didn't eat it, they just chewed it up. I think they're lonely, and I imagine what the ball-chasing lab of our childhood would have done to the Kelsey's house. That was an older couple that owned her. They just let her out in the morning. I think she would have destroyed the Kelsey's house. But see, a lot of things depend upon previous experience. And some of the animals that get the most scared, they're the animals that have led the most sheltered life. They get a little quick walk, take them back up up in the apartment building. They don't socialize enough with other dogs. They don't see enough different people. They go so many things that depend on the experience. And to give a dog a really good life, take it out in Central Park, that takes work to do that. It takes work. But I see people it goes to smell a tree and they just yank it away from the tree. They yank it away from the light post that other dogs have peed on. I say, that's checking the pee mail. You're not letting that dog check the pee mail. That's the gossip at the coffee shop. That's how they think. And there's a reason why, service puppies are taken everywhere. You don't want them afraid of stuff. I see a lot of dogs on planes, and for the most part, they're absolutely fine. There's no problem until somebody does something really stupid and brought a Belgian Malinois at the Denver airport and it bit 2 people there. I don't know what people are thinking of. But for the most part, they've been absolutely fine. Cattle's a prey species, horses are prey species. A dog's a predator.
Yeah. Is there like a difference between what predators like dogs and prey like cows are afraid of just because of what they eat?
Well, that's a very good question. I'll repeat the question. The question was, okay, cattle and horses are prey species and dogs are a predator. Is there differences in their behavior because of what they eat? It's more a difference in their defensive behavior. A prey species animal that grazes has vision on the side of the head here, and actually the fovea is a streak, so that as it's grazing, it can scan the horizon. And they tend to be very sensitive to little things that move. Because little things that move in the bushes, maybe there's a lion or something there hiding in the bushes, or a wolf hiding there in the bushes. And the predator got better depth perception vision and gets scared less easily. Where the prey, then the smallest prey species animals, they can only survive by running, like those little antelopes that I showed you. They're the most flighty at all. And nobody thought we could train those because they're so flighty. It took 10 days to train it to a sliding door opening. So the first day I moved the door this much and it oriented. That's all we did that day. Next day it was 2 inches. And at the end of a week, 10 days, you could just jerk it open. And I've got a book called The Grandin Papers where I put all my best journal articles in there. And there's a little forward as to why I put it in there. And I put the antelope paper in there. But the little lightweight prey species animals are pure flight. Then you have the Cape buffalo. Oh, he'll turn and get you. Yeah, he'll run over you like a tank. Much more of instead of fleeing, he's going to run over the top of you. But he's big enough and heavy enough to do that. Okay, right there. Music, okay, let's talk about that. I actually did a little bit of review of the literature on that. And one thing that's been learned, rapid tempo avoided. That needs to be avoided. I'd rather just say what not to play. Rapid tempo is not good. But there's been people who have worked in dairies have found that you play some music just normal, then the cows are less reactive to airplane flies over the building. I found this with my pigs. I had some pigs that were living inside, and we had a small airport near the farm. Every time a plane went over, they just were going berserk. And then we started playing a radio that had music and some talk. I really liked having some talk too, but not real loud. And then they weren't reacting to every little stupid thing, a car driving by, because they'd heard more things. And I've got a paper I did on practical environmental enrichment for pigs and poultry, and reviewed some of the music literature. You can actually go on to Google Scholar and look up music and dogs, music and pigs, and it sometimes can have some benefit. And it basically, if one absolute, get rid of the rapid boom, boom, boom kind of stuff, where it's rapid like that. And then you can play what you want at a reasonable volume. Okay, right there.
You were talking earlier about training the antelope. How is that process with like two animals, training them to participate voluntarily in medical care and other things?
Well, they were able to do all kinds of veterinary care. They can draw blood from them. They've got bears trained to stick their arm out into a pipe and you can draw blood from them.
How long does that take?
It took about, the antelope, since it's very, very flighty, it took about a month to train them, and I have directions step by step. It took 10 days just to train them to sliding door opening. But their thinking is very specific. We never could train them to accept the vet who had shot them with a dart gun, and when roofers came to the facility to fix the roof, they freaked out and hit the fence. Because see, that's a very different picture than people in front of the exhibit, people behind the exhibit, people inside the exhibit. See, all of that they'd been exposed to. And then some of the other animals are much easier to train. You just train the tiger to jump up on this grating. It's all protected contact. I went to the Omaha Zoo, and they were doing working on the nails. The elephant would stick its foot out put it on a thing to rest it on, and they were working on the foot. And you start out just, then you can use clicker training, you can feed it treats. And we first of all trained it to just stand still and go like that on the back leg. The blood samples were taken out of the vein in the back leg. And when we first did this was back in the 90s, we wrote a journal article and sent it in, and I called it Low Stress Blood Sampling of Bongo. And some reviewer wrote the nastiest thing on that. And they said the title was judgmental. Because what they were thinking were normal cortisols were, 30, 40 nanograms per milliliter. We were getting single digits out of them. Even after they stood in that box for 20 minutes to let it peak out, we were still getting single digits on nanograms per milliliter. And some people didn't want to admit that some of this rough stuff they were doing, these were not normal cortisol levels. Now, I was looking at the thing this morning about the lactate and the glucose. Those are good measures for good or bad handling. Rough handling will send glucose and lactate through the roof. It'll triple it, quadruple it. And what they thought was normal physiological values were not. And a lot of people didn't want to accept that they were freaking these animals out. Like I had one zooper say, well, I went and I caught an otter in a net, and I held it down for only 5 minutes. And I said, what if you went out in the parking garage and somebody knocked you over and took your purse? Maybe that took 30 seconds, but you'd be really stressed over that. You see, because that's fear stress. And people underestimate just how serious fear stress is. And it can send the physiology skyrocketing. Okay, right there. Yep. I don't know, but she was shocked at this, and what she did to test for this is she made a fake dog lifestyle survey, but it had very important questions sprinkled in it. And then we just graded them on no gray front, half gray, full gray muzzle. It's very simple. I made up the scoring system for it. And she went around to all these places, and they'd have lifestyle questions. Well, what kind of leashes do you use? Just stuff like that. But then there were things like, if it's home alone, it tears up the house. It jumps on everybody. Questions like that. Those were the real questions in a kind of a fake lifestyle survey. And it showed up very clearly. I mean, I think it's kind of shocking how many young dogs were turning gray. And she was shocked by this. She came to me, and Camille did all the work. All I do is help her with the methods and with reviewer comments and with the paper. It's very hard work. It's a ton of work to go out and get those surveys all done. But they're turning gray prematurely, just like the presidents do. Every single one of them, especially the younger ones. Yeah, you just wait to see when's the first white hair going to appear. And it does. You see, that's stress. And that's where the idea came from, too, for doing this. Okay, right there.
Mistake you see veterinarians or people working with animals that are in a state of fear? Like, what's the most common mistake that you see people doing?
Well, just grab it at them and stuff. But then understand quite a few dogs, you tell people to give them medication to sedate them when they come in. Now, ideally, I'd like to get puppies trained so we don't have to do that. But you don't know where some of these dogs are coming from. And there's some really bad ones. Yeah, it's going to be better let's not have a problem. Just sedate it. But then there's other animals where I can remember taking our dogs into the vet for a shot. No big deal. He just came out and the shot was done before the dog even realized it. Because they were used to being touched by everybody. And we didn't have a vaccination, trimming nails. It just was a non-issue. They were so used to being touched. See, I think we have to think about getting them out, doing more like what the service dogs do, doing that with a dog that's just going to be a pet. What I hope I've done is to get you thinking about just maybe in a different way. And then, of course, my other 2 books there, everything's available on Amazon. I don't have a picture of the Grandin papers, but it's got 2 cattle on the cover. And when we did this antelope paper, there were some people that didn't like it. Because basically we were telling them, you're stressing the what out of them. They didn't want to admit that. No, we trained them. You know why we trained them? Because our zoo veterinarian, Nancy Earlbeck, a really good friend of mine, came to me and said, I want to get low-stress vitamin A samples out of these animals. I said, there's only one way to do it. We have to train them. And then they had all this blood that they'd collected, and I decided to send some of it to the lab. and we were amazed at how low the cortisols were. Oh, I left them in that. I said, Megan, leave them in the box for 20 minutes. I want to give it a chance to peek out. And it didn't. No, they were stressing the you-know-what out. Now it's standard practice in zoos, cooperative care. It's not standard practice in horses. And too many veterinarians are getting very seriously injured. That's going to be one of the things one of my students is going to work on. Okay, right there? Oh, great, right there, okay. All right.
I had a question about how we as vet staff can educate ourselves better on identifying things in the office that we have around that potentially scare the client, and how we can tell owners at home, hey, you think this is what you was afraid of, work on it like this.
Well, the thing is that if they see enough stuff, there won't be anything in the office they should be afraid of. One thing that Marty Becker does, because he calls this is what he calls a vaccination, a weapon of ass destruction. Well, if you fed them out of a syringe, they're going to think it's wonderful. You see, this is the thing where you have associations. You see, we had to train our antelope to tolerate a pinch that was worse than the blood draw, little pinch. And then the blood draw was like nothing. And when we first did that, we were accused of lying that we hadn't sedated them. No, we hadn't sedated them. And I have a picture of a blood draw right out of the back leg, no sedation in an antelope. And when we did this, nobody thought it was possible to train the most flighty animal. We did. You have to habituate very slowly and carefully before you even do any operant conditioning, like the door training. And then they could walk. We just had to use this big box. It was like a packing box. And because I wanted to make something cheap that people could do. And then you just let them walk through it, and then gradually train them to the doors, and then gradually train them to stay in there 1 second, and then, then each day we just did a little bit. And then the thing that was good is that the moms would train the babies. The babies were an absolute piece of cake. Super, super easy to train. Okay, right here.
So in instances where we, as a vet staff, don't need like a bunch of lights, do you think that for the vet, it would be a better environment if we worked in lower lights?
Well, it depends what they're used to. I mean, if you had lights, a lot of lights at home, they'd be fine with it. So much of it depends upon what they get used to. And there are a lot of bright lights around, it's going to be fine. Now, I saw ICU one time where, okay, the people, one thing I noticed that even though it was crammed with desks and cages and stuff, it was pretty laid back. And then I've been in other ICUs, I won't say where it was because I'm going to be critical of it. Bright lights, the machinery was making all kinds of noise. I guess you've turned a lot of that noise off. I kind of liked it that, especially that little Pomeranian, there's somebody sitting there, desk right next to it. Maybe he'd be more stressed if it was off in a room by itself. And don't slam the doors on those cages. You use them quietly. That's something I really learned yesterday. Shoreline cages can be closed quietly. But a whole lot of little simple things like that add up. But we need to be taking puppies out, and of course you want to get their vaccines into them, where they see a lot more different stuff. They're going to be less afraid of things. That's why the service dog is taken everywhere. Any other questions? Okay, right up there. Well, this is a real problem. You have the poor rescue dogs. They've been beaten up and everything else. And if you can figure out what the thing is they're afraid of, let's say it's white coats, I can probably take those out of its life. Because sometimes you can get these fear memories, like that black hat horse. I don't think that horse will ever be safe to ride around black hats. but because I can't control black hats. But then, when you're training horses, the beginner bit is a jointed snaffle. That's what you begin with. So if somebody's going to beat up a horse with a bit, it's going to be a jointed snaffle. It's a perfectly good bit, but since it's a beginner bit, somebody's going to do something bad, they'll do it with that bit. And I have seen horses where you get rid of the jointed bit, go to one piece, and they calm right down. It's like a different feeling picture. And I've had the students hold the different bits in their hand. And you just use a one-piece solid bit, and it's fine. And we have a thing called the right horse class where they train rescues. And another problem you can get is bucking when you change gaits, because a saddle feels different at different gaits. Well, use a different saddle and a different pad. It totally feels different. I can control the saddle and pad I put on them. I can make that horse safe to ride. But the problem with the black hat horse is I can't get rid of all the cowboy hats. You can do a lot of things to reduce it. You're still going to get bucked off. Where something like, with something I can remove from the animal's life, then, all right, let's say it was a pinch collar, well, I can get rid of that. You see, that's something you put on the animal and that I can control. But it's just like a PTSD in a soldier that's in a bad situation. And it interacts with the flighty genetics. It can be very difficult to get rid of that. And you get a rescue, you don't know what it's afraid of. You know, one dog was baseball hats. Another unfortunate generalization a lot of dogs make is guys are bad. And I went to a meeting of veterinary forensics. This was not a fun conference. I was there just a few months ago. And half of cat and dog abuse is domestic violence. I saw this pie chart. I was just shocked at that, looking at that pie chart. No, that's just really bad. People are doing that kind of stuff. But sometimes you can figure out what it is it's afraid of, and you can gradually get them over. And then some dogs are just afraid of everything, and it's going to take a long time to gradually work with them, where you make treats and petting associated with. But you have one that, I don't think that black hat horse would ever be safe to ride in the presence of a black hat. You can reduce it, but it's very difficult to totally get rid of it. I wouldn't ride it. Boy, we presented the black hat. We knew the handling history of this horse. We actually knew it. He was a Mustang. And they unloaded him in a rodeo arena. I wanted to not have him run off. I was holding him, and the owner was just carrying the black hat, and I could feel him start to rear. And I go, get that hat out of here. Then when I put it on the ground, I got him to touch it. Wasn't as scary on the ground, but the closer it got to here, the more scary it got. You see, it's a picture. It's like, boom. Black hats are associated with my eyes hurting because this jerk threw alcohol in his eyes, of all things. It was awful. And we knew exactly who did it and where it happened. But a lot of these rescues, you don't know what all that's happened. Okay, right there.
For animals that are in like rescue rehab for these programs where they're in the wild or being taken and the goal is to get them out as fast as possible.
This would be wild animals that are being rescued. Okay.
How do you feel about like the fear in terms of them being in captivity, being handled, and
Well, you say you have a wild animal that's injured, you bring it in and work with it.
yeah, and like you can't really train them,
No, you can't.
mitigate contact because they want them to remain wild.
Well, then you're going to have to medicate it do the procedure so it's not freaking out. Otherwise, you'd be getting terrible fear stress. You see, now with a new puppy, I would rather prefer, let's get it used to lots of different people touching it, and it's associated with treats. And when you first introduce it to little children, like 3-year-olds, you got to make sure they don't maul the puppy. You've got to make sure that the little kids are gentle with the puppy. So that's a positive experience. And so that it grows up getting used to all different kinds of things. Having its feet held, having a strange person maybe hold its feet. It gets a treat for not pulling the paw back. And then nail trims aren't going to be warfare. So you try to think about it like, how do you think the dog would perceive this? But it's sensory-based. Smells, touches, what's it seeing. It's a sensory-based world, not a word-based world. I think that's one of the most important things that you can think of, a sensory-based world. I'm seeing a clock up there. I've already gone through the break time, and I have to go to the hospital now. This all just came up this morning, so I won't be at the cocktail party tonight. But I just want to thank everybody for coming.